Hi everyone. This meeting is live streamed. It is recorded. And if you do not want to be recorded or do not want to be live streamed, you can always turn off your camera and turn off your name so that it is not streamed and it is not recorded. Hi everyone. Welcome to WeeklyWed. WeeklyWed is an international speaker series on AI, AV, IoT from Business School of AI by Sudha Jamte, who is a Stanford instructor and has been teaching at Business School of AI and at many other European universities. And today we are here to learn more about these AI, AV, and IoT technologies. I am your host, Yashaswini Vishwanath. You can call me Yash. I'm from Bangalore, India. I'm an AI researcher and I do a lot of research related to ethics, privacy, and I am very passionate about ethics that we need to make this world a better place by not just by creating AI, but by creating AI that is good for everybody, by creating AI that is beneficial for everyone and makes everybody's life in a meets it in a good way. Um, for me, ethics is something that has come naturally to me, and I want to take this opportunity to share my knowledge about ethics with all of you here. Today, we have a very special speaker with us, Debbie Reynolds, and welcome, Debbie Reynolds. Uh, I would like to introduce Debbie Reynolds to all of you. Debbie Reynolds, just a second. Debbie Reynolds is the data diva. She has made a name for herself as a leading voice in the world of data privacy and emerging technology, with a focus on industries such as ad tech, fintech, edtech, biometrics, IoT, AI, smart manufacturing, smart cities, privacy tech, smartphones, mobile app development. She has 20 years of experience in emerging technologies. She has established herself as a trusted advisor and thought leader, helping organizations navigate the complex landscape of data privacy and data protection. She is the CEO and Chief Data Privacy Officer of Debbie Reynolds Consulting LLC. Debbie brings a unique combination of technical expertise, business acumen, and passionate advocacy to her. Welcome, Debbie. Welcome to Weekly Wed, and we are so honored to have you here at Weekly Wed. We are keen about learning from you about the recent presentation that you made and everything that you have to vouch for, advocate for about um, IoT, AI, AV in this space. And the floor is yours, Debbie.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Yash, for inviting me to speak. Thank you. I think this is my second time speaking with the series, so I'm really happy to be here. Well, you tell me how you want the flow to go for the presentation.
Sure. Uh, I would like to keep your slide open and then I would like to go over it and have a discussion with you because the slides are already on the LinkedIn. And uh, here it goes. Debbie,
Yep.
yes, yes, thank you, Debbie, for sharing it. And when we talk about Internet of Things, data privacy, and connected vehicles, here, what is the type of connection that we are referring to, Debbie?
That's a great question. So, when we are talking about connected vehicles, we're talking about vehicles that have many computers inside, vehicles that have internet connectivity. So, think about, let's say you have a smartphone and you connect your phone to your car to listen to music. Or you connect your phone to your car to listen to or do phone calls. You know, a car is basically a computer or a series of computers on wheels, and it's collecting a lot of information. We know that cars are very advanced technologically in terms of what it can do, and some of that technology is related to the operation of the car. You know, checking on different systems, like a car can tell you when it needs oil change or when the gas is running low and things like that. So you rely on your car for things like that. Also, newer cars, like things like airbags or different safety features, require, you know, this more advanced technology. But in addition to that, cars are collecting more personal information about people. So, you know, like the example I gave around you connect your phone to the car to listen to music. But what a lot of people don't know is when you do that connection, it's taking a copy of things that are on your phone, whether you know it or not. So that could be text messages. A lot of times your complete contact list will be downloaded into the car, and you don't really have you as a user of the car don't really have visibility into what is happening with that data, and people don't really even know because you think, oh well, I just connect my phone to my car and then I want to make a phone call, but they're not realizing that the car is taking a copy of their address book and it keeps it in there, right? So one of the challenges is, you know, who has access to the car. Some of that data can be transmitted wirelessly to other places. We're seeing situations where companies are taking that data from personal information from cars, they're selling it to data brokers. And as a result, some people, they're getting their car insurance is getting high because they're saying, hey, we got your report from your car about how you drive your car, and it's not transparent to people how those decisions are being made is becoming very harmful. Also, you know, there's enough personal information in cars that people can do things like identity theft, right? So, for example, if you got a loan for your car, some of that loan information that you may have provided to a car manufacturer may be in the car. Um, People can go to like an auto shop and get like a little dongle that you put on the car, and it can pretty much download almost anything that's in the car. And that may include, you know, maybe your name, your address, your phone number. It may be financial details about you, information about your trip. And, you know, I think jurisdictions around the world are very concerned, especially as we see things in the US around laws trying to criminalize women going to get reproductive health services around, you know, tracking their movements, their location, you know, where they are, where they go, you know, to try to criminalize some of their behavior. So it's a huge issue, and I think a lot of people don't fully understand how much data that cars collect about them and what could be the potential harm.
Thank you, Debbie. Debbie, maybe we can turn off the slides and I can talk to you. And so, but I will be taking content from that. Um Debbie, talking about statistics, we see that 90% of the cars sold are likely to have embedded connectivity by 2030. When we talk about embedded connectivity, we talk about all these new age technologies that are seen inside the car. Sudha Jamte, she has a course on autonomous vehicles where I have learned about the various components that a vehicle will have that can interact with each other and gain data, like what you have mentioned. So, when we say embedded connectivity, could we list some examples of embedded connectivity?
Yeah. So, internet connectivity, meaning like you can make phone calls from your car. Newer cars have apps that you can download. That's another issue where the app can allow you, or anyone who has access to the app can allow them to do functions in the car. Like they can do things like start the car, they can change settings in the car. Many cars have cameras internal that people don't know about. So a lot of people know about cameras that are outside the car that you may use for your backup light or different things like that. But people don't know that there are cameras inside the car, or there may be cameras inside the mirror even. So someone, for example, who may have access to an app, they may be able to actually see who's in the car, see what you're doing in the car, see people outside the car. And so those things are connected to the internet, and it's always a question of who has access, what are they doing with that data. There's a um, a situation where people are concerned about the connectivity of cars being used against survivors of domestic abuse, where their information is being collected, their location may be tracked, but the fact that the car is transmitting information that can be picked up wirelessly or sent back to a manufacturer or sent back to whoever the car maker is something that I think people don't really realize. I think most people wouldn't be concerned about that if it was just kind of safety data or information about the operation of the car that would help a person, right? That would benefit someone. But some of the data uses that we're talking about are things that really could be harmful to people, not beneficial.
Yes, Debbie. Here, we see that 91% of the US households, they owned at least one car in 2022. And 26% of the car buyers report that it's not transparent. Now, when we talk about transparency, Debbie, how do you define um, transparency in this context? How do you tell what is to be told to the consumers by the manufacturers?
Yeah. I think there's a huge problem with the lack of transparency because I think people don't even imagine that their car is collecting data about them and their personal information is being transmitted and sent other places and being used for other purposes, right? So, there's a story of a man who he was denied car insurance, and he couldn't figure out why. And they said, well, they said, well, we got a report about your car, about the way that you drive, and we decided that we're going to deny you insurance, right? And he's like, well, I never signed up for that. I never asked for that. I don't even know what possible information could you have about me and my car that would, tell you this information. And so I think the people are really shocked about the uses of data from their car, especially if it's not related to safety, right? So these people, they're like, well, I didn't get a traffic ticket. I haven't like broken any traffic laws, but yet the data that's collected in my car is being used against me to, raise my rates or even deny me insurance. And there's a concern also about, because these makers can tell where you go, like people are concerned, like, okay, if I drive in a certain neighborhood, then will my auto rates be impacted negatively, even though I've not done anything wrong?
Debbie, we see that 72% of the drivers are uncomfortable with the idea of automakers sharing their data with third parties. Now, we collecting the data is one, and then sharing it with the third parties is a totally other thing where these third parties could be nowhere related to the automakers themselves. Can you give examples of such third parties who will be interested in data that is there within the car and extracted from it?
Yeah. uh, you know, Advertisers definitely. Maybe there's a certain store that you like to go to or an area that you frequent. Maybe they want to steer you in a direction towards those services or businesses and advertise to you. A concern uh, you, it is also about people tracking you that you may not want to track you, right? There is, and this is especially concerning in a situation of domestic abuse, where we've seen people say, I I was divorced from my husband. He was abusive. I tried to get away from him, but he had access to the app to my car, and he knew like exactly where I go, or he tried to, do things to my car, have my car operate in some way that I wouldn't want, right, against my will or against my desire. So I think when we think about, people having cars, right? People just don't imagine what could possibly be be done with this data, and they're very harmful things. I think in the report I talked about a little bit about you know um, things like people, let's say the movements of people overseas, things about I this is something that actually happened to a family member of mine. So some automaker, because of the data that was collected in the car, they were able to cyber criminals were able to actually take that information, send it out in a letter, as if they were saying, okay, you pay us money for this extended warranty, and found out it was a scam. Right. So they had paid money for this warranty, they had a repair, and then once they tried to call to get the repair, they found out that they were actually paying someone and it was a scam, right? And so typically when you see those, we think about scams like, okay, so I'm just gonna get a random email from someone or a letter, and then they're gonna be very vague about the information that they have. With cars, is very specific, right? So they know when you bought the car, how much you bought the car. If you have a loan for the car, they know how much you owe on the car. If you got a repair, they know the amount of the repair. They know the VIN number, the actual identification number of the car, right? So if you get a letter or email like that that has all the information in it, it seems more credible, right? And so what we're doing is, because we're collecting too much data in cars, we're creating a situation that's making it easier for people to actually do crimes against us. There's another situation, I didn't talk about it in this presentation, but um, uh, people who can collect your data from cars could possibly create a lien against the title of your car. So let's say, for instance, let's say you bought your car and you have the title to your car, right? So you don't owe any money on it or anything, and you decide you want to sell it, right? So what cyber criminals can do, they take money, they take information that they get from the car, and they can actually say, go to an agency and say, hey, this Yash owes me $10,000 against this car. And they'll put it in the system. You'll never know about it, right? Until you go try to sell the car. And then you can't sell it until you pay $10,000, right? So these are the types of crimes that we're seeing. And the reason why is a huge problem when this data is being shared with third parties, because, you wouldn't agree to that. You wouldn't agree to your data being shared with someone, especially if you don't know who they are and what they're doing. And so the ecosystem of data sharing is broken in this way, and it's, becoming a huge issue for consumers when they buy these cars.
Debbie, when we talk about cyber attacks, we learned from whatever you told in the last couple of minutes, we see that there is an increase in the number of cyber attacks. But um, is it that the way they are attacking is something that's new and something that's not seen before? Because generally, when we talk about cyber attacks, we talk about man in the middle and DOS attacks, denial of service, and then we talk about encryption and such things. So, here, how different is it? How different are these cyber attacks from the regular attacks that we see on PC systems?
Yeah. The difference between the cyber attacks that you see on PC systems and cars is that cars have much more information, and it's easier to get the data from cars, right? So a person, just give you an example. So like I said, cars have apps, right? So let's say your car has an app and you never use the app, right? Someone who has proximity to the car, and many cars, most cars now, the actual identification VIN number is visible from outside the car. All a person would need was the app, and they need that number, and they can control stuff in your car, right? So it's that easy, right? Or someone can buy a dongle for $20 from a auto store and put it, they have access to your car, put it under the dashboard and like gather information. So I think that the difference is that the cars collect a lot more data, right? It's not just one account, right? It's your phone, it's where you go, it's who's in the car, it's photos and videos from inside the car, outside the car. It just creates an attack vector that's unlike any other device that I can think of, right? So it's not just one account, right? There are actually uh, uh, reports that say that the data in your car is worth more than the car, right? So a person does not have to steal your car. They could steal the data from your car and they can do identity theft against you. They could buy another car based on all the information that they can glean from your car. So I think that's why, in my view, I can't think of any other connected device that has so much information and can create so much harm because there was just entirely too much personal information that's being collected by cars.
Debbie, could you tell us about the Mozilla Foundation Privacy Not Included report and how we can relate that to the connected car scenario that we are discussing?
Let me pull it up. So Mozilla Foundation did a report. So what they did is called they have a thing they call privacy not included. So they took 25 car manufacturers. They looked at all their privacy policies. They looked at, data breaches in the news. They looked at operation of how, what they were able to glean from what cars collected. And what they found is that 100% of cars collect people's personal data. 85% of them share, 84% sell or share that data with third parties. 92% either provide little or no control for a consumer about the personal data that's collected, right? Because just like the example I told you about your address book being downloaded to your car. First of all, most people don't know that that happens. The second thing is you can't control it, right? You can't stop it from happening. And once it's in there, it's in there. So like let's say someone got into your car and they want to listen to their music from their phone. They connect their phone to your car. So now their information, their address book, their text messages, other things that are on the phone that are not encrypted, because you have to decrypt, you have to give the car access to your phone to be able to do all this stuff. And people are not really sure about that. 80, 68% of car manufacturers they rated had bad track records for protecting data. That's like through data breaches and things like that. And then none of the car makers followed any of their voluntary pledges around data privacy in cars. So I think for me, this report is very important and it's very eye-opening. We've heard some car manufacturers say that they didn't think that this report was accurate, but they've not provided any alternate information to say why it's not accurate.
Debbie, here when we think about hacking, automator hacking, you mentioned a very nice phrase that the worth of the data that we get from a car is much more than the worth of the car itself. And we see here that um, the kind of sophistication that cars have been coming now is always increasing and will always increase. It will always have more embedded devices, it will have more AI, it will have better connectivity. It is a revolution that we are seeing wherein in the IoT space, where most of the components are connected. It could be something as simple as an engine. The engine, how the engine health, how it is, how the engine health is measured and sent to a data center. And there are these user related preferences that are saved, and user preferences are used against the user in certain situations. So, Debbie, what I was thinking was, if we if these user data are shown to the third parties and the models are learning from it, then how do we tell that this privacy is ours? This is a right to privacy that we have. What are the regulations that the people who are consumers of the car can tell?
Yeah. Well, this is a huge problem, and there's a lot of um, loopholes in laws around privacy, especially as it relates to cars, right? So there are very few laws around how automobile makers manage car data. There are some general laws around data sharing, and we're seeing in the US, especially a couple different states like Illinois, New Jersey, and California have actually passed certain laws that are specific to cars related to making sure that people are aware of their data. So, like, for example, California just passed a law that went into effect in January, and it basically says that if you are a resident of California, you buy a car, the automaker has to let you know about the in-car cameras, like what are they doing. People have to be able to opt in to that data use, and they have to be able to have a option to opt out of that data use. Also, that law uh, prohibits car companies from transmitting uh, camera data or video data outside of the car, right? And this is a big deal because, like I said, a lot of the data that cars collect about you can be transmitted outside the car. So this is a big deal for this. In New Jersey, they passed a law that if any car is like resold, that whoever's reselling the car, they have to delete the personal data out of it before they sell it. So this is a big deal. So let's say you have a car, you sell the car, you think, okay, they clean it up, they do different things to resell the car, but a lot of times they don't take that data out. So just like the example I gave about you connecting your phone to your car to listen to music and it has your address book, that means that the person who bought the car, if that data was not taken out by the dealership or whoever is selling it, that information will still be in there, right? So a lot of people, they use functions on their car, like it can open up their garage door or different things. So the car has your address in it. Like the person can actually go to your house, open your house, and steal things from your house. There's a law in the state of Illinois that just recently went into effect where it says that if a car is uh, uh, any dealer or any company that is reclaiming cars for any reason, whether it's like repossessed or it's an accident, they have to actually sanitize the data. So they have to reset the car and erase the personal data from the cars, because what they found is that a lot of identity theft was happening, and they traced it back to the car based on all the information that was actually in the car. So I think, uh, and there are a couple of uh, car brands in the US to say, well, even though only certain states have laws around cars, around opt out of data sharing or data sale, we're going to allow, anyone in the US to have this right. So the problem is that from a consumer perspective, you know, I should not have to know that, Hyundai handles their data different than Toyota. Or, I don't live in a state where I can, opt out of things, or it's not transparent to me how my data is used, or I'm not consented, for example, in this insurance thing, I'm not consented to have my data sold to a data broker or to an insurance company about how I drive my car, right? So I think all these are still very open questions, and there are a lot of gaps in how regulation is definitely helping this. But I think, I guess two things have to happen. I think one, there needs to be stronger data protection on a federal level in the US. But then also, I think because there are some very specific things to cars, I think we need some more regulation specific to cars because I just can't just imagine. It's hard to imagine all the harmful things that can happen to people as a result of the personal data collected by cars.
Tiffany, when we talk about connected cars and the various hacks that might happen on them, one thing that comes to our mind is the identity theft, which is taking up the identity of the person itself. Now, this is something that is of huge concern when we talk about identity theft and financial fraud, especially taking the identity and using it for it is so different. It's not at all related to the car, but this is something that we need to think about and discuss. What do you think about identity theft and financial fraud?
Yeah, identity theft and financial fraud is huge, mostly because from a car perspective, there's enough information in a car for someone to use your information, impersonate you, and buy another car that you don't even know about, right? And so I can't even think of any hack that would do that. So you think, let's say you think you're on your computer, someone may compromise your bank account information, right? And get that information, but they probably wouldn't be able to get enough information from that one source to be able to do identity theft. They would need like multiple different data points to do that. And so that's what cars do. So they car makers, when you go into a store to actually do things like get an oil change, you may be financing a car. These are things that I've actually seen in cars, right? And you just would not ever believe that. So you I need to ask, like, why is my personal information in the car that anybody can access, right? So I had a situation where I went to get an oil change. I was in a different town than where I live, it's in a different state. And I gone to a car dealership and I said, hey, I'm not from here. I want to get an oil change. And I asked them if I said I want to leave my name and my number so they could contact me. And they were like, well, no, I don't need that. And I was like, what are you talking about? So they got this dongle and they went underneath the dashboard, pulled up everything about me, right? So it was my name, my address, my phone number, all that was in there. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, why is this information in my car? This doesn't make any sense, right? And so, you know, the one of the statistics I had pulled up from my presentation is that, a cyber criminal typically would have to pay $1,000 to get someone's personal information off the dark web for that they want to use for identity theft. Before a car, they can get that information for $2. Right. So a car has more information than even these identity theft profiles, and they're cheaper to get on the dark web. And so it's like a whole ecosystem that's like totally wide open and not really, you know, taking the appropriate safeguards for people. And to me, a lot of that is around just collecting entirely too much information in cars.
Now, here we are discussing about hacking and automotive hacking. We see that there are a lot of IoTs that are there and data is collecting. What can you tell about the awareness that people have about what is actually being done?
Yeah. I would say awareness is almost zero, I would say, right? So I was shocked. I work with companies that develop software and tools for telematic car systems. And then also I'm a car owner, right? And so some of the things that I found out over the last couple of years, I was very shocked about all of the data information and stuff that's collected. Not only what's collected, but then what happens to that, right? It's kind of an open book. So whoever has access to the car can do things to the car, can have a car operate in certain ways, can collect that data. And it's just, there's no transparency there, right? So when you go into a car, you see a screen, it gives you functions or options to do different things. It doesn't tell you that your whole address book or your text messages are in the car that someone else can see, right? So I think that there has to be a lot more awareness around what is collected in cars and what types of things that people can do, if anything, to protect themselves. One of the things that I saw in my research is that a lot more people are either keeping the cars that they have, or they are buying older cars that don't have as much technology in it, right? And so to me, this is a disaster for automakers, right? They should wake up and see, hey, people don't want their data, their personal data, to be, first of all, be collected in cars, especially if it's not necessary. And then they certainly don't want that data to be sent to third parties in ways that can be harmful.
Debbie, what about the insurance and the automaker data sales? Like, is there some relation between um, this and also the data brokers and the automakers, the ones who consume this data and the ones who manufacture the vehicles? Is there some deal between this triangle, the insurance, the data brokers, and the automakers?
Yes, there is. And so that's not transparent to users as well. Many years ago, I think Toyota was one of the first companies to say, hey, if you allow us to track your car, we'll give you a dongle that you put in your car, and then we'll track, the way you operate your car. You may get like discounts on your insurance or something like that, right? And so what we've seen is that that's kind of like smoke and mirrors, because car makers, they don't need that. Right? They can just take the data wirelessly from the car. So they don't need a special thing. They don't need your permission to do it, right? In the US, unfortunately, a lot of this data collection is more opt out as opposed to opt in. And I'm hoping that a lot more laws will change in the US, especially, so there's more opt in consent as opposed to having people opt out. It's hard for people to opt out. There are a lot of things they would need to opt out of, right? And the problem is that they're not aware of all the data that's actually being collected. So there is a there is a triangle between these data brokers and these insurance companies, and automakers are making a lot of money on consumers as a result of this data. There was a report that I mentioned in my presentation that came out in the New York Times about General Motors and the data that they sold to data brokers and insurance companies. And as a result of that report and of public outrage, they actually stopped selling data to two of the data brokers that were mentioned in that report, right? So to me, that's an example of the type of thing that can happen when people are aware of what's happening with their data. I read those, actually, Casimir Hill from the New York Times, she's done two or three articles about cars or car makers and privacy. And, I read through the comments and stuff. I didn't see anybody who said, oh, I love all my personal data being taken. And so like no one wants that. No one likes that, right? I think for companies, when you get far away from things that benefit a person, it's hard to justify that data transfer or that data sale. I was in a meeting with, actually, when I presented this presentation initially to the IoT Advisory Board for the U.S. Department of Commerce, there was actually a lobbyist from the automaker industry on in that meeting, and they basically said, someone in the board meeting asked, well, does my all this information is collected, it stays in the car, right? And they were like, yes, it does. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Right. So this is the problem, right? Where there isn't transparency, there isn't like enough truthfulness in what is being collected. I think this GM is a great example where, okay, when people didn't know about it and they were collecting this data, they were fine with selling the data to data brokers and insurance companies, right? But then once it became a public report and there was a public outcry, people were like, we don't like this. We don't want this. We were seeing people say, I used to love GM trucks or GM cars. Now I'm never going to use them again because I don't trust them anymore, right? So I think, in addition to it should, companies should want customers to trust them. And I think this is creating a level of mistrust that's going to that is already having a huge impact on automakers because we see car sales are down. We see that people are keeping their cars longer. I had a new car that I sold and bought a used car, right? So from an automaker perspective, they're going in the opposite direction of where they need to go, right? Because I think we like all the new gadgets and all the new cool things you can do with cars. We want that without having our data, our privacy encroached upon. We don't want a rise in identity theft. We don't want people, we don't want to enable domestic abuse or abusers to be able to take advantage of all the car data stuff. And then also just the idea that people can easily gather information from the car and use it for purposes that you may not even imagine.
Debbie, we had a very good discussion about the privacy, the data that is collected in the car. One side of the seesaw is this euphoria that we have done some amazing advancements in the technology. But the other side is that these advancements are capturing data, and this data, it could be at peril. Somebody might use it, and hackers might use it to a very great disadvantage of the users of the car. Knowing all these things, it gives us both of the perspectives where an AI engineer or an AI designer is thinking about how to bring in newness, how to bring in new technologies into the car, and also from an ethics perspective where we are trying to see it is good to bring in new features, but at the same time, those should be privacy enabled. um, the feature should be privacy enabled. What I meant to say by that statement is that although the data is collected, it is to be secured, and it is to be seen to it that it stays only related to the user and to the person with whom they give the consent, and also the opt-in and opt-out. The default has to be opt-out rather than opt-in, so that only those who want can opt in for their data. And I really liked the fact that there are very good technologies that have come, and also how these technologies can be used for social good is a perspective that can be unraveled further. And uh, I open the floor for discussion now. um, if anybody has questions, please ask the questions in the chat and I'll field it to Debbie. And I just have a disclaimer here. This is recorded and this is streamed live on YouTube. So if you do not want to be seen on YouTube or recorded, please do not turn on your camera and turn it off. And also do not come on voice if you do not want to be recorded. You can always put the question in the chat. The chat is not visible. And yes.
Thank you, Debbie. It was a good talk. It just makes me think that I should delete all the apps that I'm not using. Number one. Is there any way we could protect ourselves, balancing the comfort versus privacy? We usually when it shows a whole bunch of text, we just accept and move forward. Um, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's a very open question. What can we do to balance the comfort in the car versus the privacy? Do you suggest that we go after the fact and then go to all the data brokers and delete our data in some other mode?
Yeah,
What do we do?
that's a good question. Unfortunately, there really aren't any good answers here, right? The problem is that the mechanism that is in place right now, where in some cases, depending on the jurisdiction you live in, you can opt out, but opt out is not easy. It's hard to do. There was in the presentation I did, there was a situation where this woman, she said she was trying to opt out of all these things on her car. It took her a month, right? She's a tech savvy person. It took her a month to opt out of all these different things in the car. You can't opt out of what data brokers are doing if you don't know who they are, right? You have to know who these people are. So this is a faceless industry where their data is being transmitted without people's knowledge or consent to third parties. In certain jurisdictions, you may not even have that right, to be able to opt out. So that's a challenge. So I think from a person's perspective, what I see people are doing, like I say, by having older cars, limiting, some people, they don't connect their phone to their car at all. That's probably one thing possibly do. If you have a newer car, again, it's such a huge problem because you can't really stop these car makers from collecting this data. You're not aware of what data they're collecting, what they're doing with this. So it's really hard. That's the problem, right? The problem is people aren't aware of what's being collected and they don't have any control over it. And that's really the big point of that Mozilla report and the reason why it came out, because they're like, people do want to know what's being collected in their cars and they want to be able to protect themselves. And it's hard to do that if you don't know what's being collected about your car, about you in cars. In addition to being able to have people have transparency, one of the recommendations that I made on this IoT advisory board is that we have universal opt out. So then, for example, if you want to opt out of something from a car, you have an option to opt out of everything, as opposed to you having to go to all these different places, right? So the shift there is changing, putting the work on the company and not on the consumer. So you shouldn't have to go to 20 or 30 or 200 places to be able to opt out your data. And then you're not sure if they're just because you opt out, that doesn't mean that they delete it. That's a totally different process, right? So I think it's entirely too complex for consumers right now. It's not transparent to them what's being collected around cars. And from my perspective, especially personal data, it's not necessary to collect someone's personal data to operate a car. So the fact that all of this personal data is being collected, to me, is a huge problem.
And Debbie, I remember that if we are collecting all this data and if we want the consent is removed or the person gets aware that the data is being collected and they want the um, uh, model to forget, then machine unlearning techniques have to come into picture so that the model unlearns whatever it has learned from the data previously. We have a question from Sudha and from Debika. Sudha, can you please voice your question?
Sure. Thank you, Debbie. This is amazing. I have taught a course on autonomous vehicle at Stanford Continuing Studies for couple sessions, many sessions actually, before I switched to AI, which is like the hot topic, and there is more demand now. I also have a course on AI from connected products on LinkedIn Learning. So I feel responsible as I'm hearing you. I'm getting people excited about doing more with the data from the car. But I always thought about it as business and cybersecurity, which you covered so beautifully. But you said something about how somebody could have access to your car after they are, they are divorced or after a breakup. Is there any law? I mean, that is, people do have, divorce settlements, and one person gets the car, and then they would get the data of the other person. And they likely would have malicious intent because they're angry also. So is there any law that stops this? And, like when you resell a car, you have to reset. When you, have a divorce, and you pass the car to the other person, are they supposed to reset the other person's data? Is there some law in the making, maybe?
No. Right. This actually, the example you just brought up is a very important one because I think this illustrates exactly the problem that we have in the US around privacy law, right? So in my presentation, I talked about this woman. Her name is Christine Dow. She was divorcing her husband. He was abusive to her. They got divorced. When they were married, he bought the car under his name because she said he had the better credit at the time, right? So she got better rates. They got divorced. She got awarded the car in the divorce, but because he was the person who purchased the car, quote unquote, he started stalking her. Like he would follow her around and do things to the car, right? And she tried to go to the automaker and say, hey, can you like disable, this access? I'm divorced. This is my car now. And they basically said no, because he's the owner of the car, right? And so this is the gap that we have in the US, where we have consumer privacy rights and not human privacy rights. So because he's the person who bought the car, she has no rights whatsoever because she did not purchase the car. And that's wrong, I think, right? So what she had to do is she had to find a mechanic that would disconnect the GPS features in her car. And so other things in the car wouldn't work as well. Like she couldn't use the SOS button in the car where like you get an accident or whatever. And she's like, she had to pay it out of her own pocket. And she's like, I didn't care because I just don't want to be stalked, by my husband. So, this is a huge problem that, because we have that gap in the US between human and consumer rights and human consumer laws. Is a problem when the person who owns a property or owns certain data, they don't have really any agency against it. So yeah, that's a good question.
So is there something in the works to make that happen? Because it's not just the ownership. So I can see there could be a law that would say, okay, when you transfer the car to somebody, the DMV needs to be involved and transfer the ownership. That seems like an easy fix that can be added in the law. But I'm thinking like in a Tesla, when two people share the app and they both have like profiles, then when the car goes away with one person, then it's very easy. I know that I can sit here, look at the Tesla app and turn off charging. I can do a lot of things from the Tesla app on another, when somebody else is using the car. So the data, there's got to be something that would, look at the apps, like you were saying, apps, collected data that is sitting in the vehicle that needs to be purged. Is there any law or even a discussion from our lawmakers in the making?
Well, the FCC is trying to come up with something that can help protect victims of domestic abuse, what they're calling survivors of domestic abuse. And then I think there's a law in California where they're trying to do something as well. And I'm not sure exactly what they're proposing, but they want to do something, right? They want to do something where there's creating more choice for a person. Unfortunately, a lot of the proposals are around, you have to have a police report, to say that, I'm being stalked or something. And then what they want to do is have automakers say, hey, this person gave this report, they're being stalked. We want you to make this change. But again, that gap is huge, especially if you weren't like the owner of the car. The thing we were talking about, the Tesla app, yes, you can have different profiles. The issue is that they're not obligated to help you, right? If you're not the owner of the car, the profile is just, your use of the car. It's not, you know, and actually there was a famous case that happened recently where a woman, I think it was also a domestic abuse thing where she wanted, you know, her either her data deleted or she wanted to have some function deleted or disabled, and Tesla would not do it. They were like, well, you don't have rights to the car, so we don't have to do anything. So this is a problem, a huge problem. So we need more law or regulation around what automakers can do in these situations. And it shouldn't be, oh, well, you don't live in this state, so we are not going to delete your data. Or, you know, you didn't purchase the car, so we don't care that you are being stalked by someone, right? This concern.
Thank you, Debbie. I'll let Deepika ask her question. I have more questions as I'm listening to you, but I want to let Deepika ask questions. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Debbie. That was amazing. Now my brain's like, I need to get a 1997 Honda and like,
Oh,
you know what I mean? So my question, so you had mentioned that when you presented your findings, a lobbyist tried to dispute it and you had to say no. So I want to kind of understand how much of it is just coming down to us versus the lobbyist that is basically speaking on behalf of the auto industry, because they are outside of just car sales alone. Like you're mentioning how even car sales aren't up anymore. People are buying used cars and not really always opting for the newest thing. So much of it seems like their income is going to slowly become more of just like selling our data rather than the car itself. So I wonder how much of it is just like, you know, the SEC is coming up against the automakers, lobbyist groups and things like that. So I want to know, like, how can we even circumvent that? Because whenever I think about lobbying alone, it's such a behemoth. Like I don't even know how to approach regulating them versus us as a consumer.
yeah, right. So these lobbyists, obviously, they're very well funded. They have been successful in the past in getting laws either not passed or watered down around this. But I think the thing that's happening now is with more consumer awareness, the car companies, they're like, well, do I want to lose a customer trust, or do I want to lose a car sale because I want to make extra money on the side for this, right? And so I think that report that came out with the New York Times about General Motors, you know, obviously they were doing the selling data and they were fine with it, right? Because they're making extra money. But then they stopped doing it because they found it was too heated of an issue with the consumers, right? So if you're doing something that consumers don't want or don't like, or you know, creates mistrust, you know, in that situation, they had to really cave into what the consumer want and not what the lobbyists wanted, right? So I think the more consumer awareness, the more people will say, which I've put in my slide deck, you know, people are like, well, if for any car maker, if you sell my data, I'm not going to buy your car, right? You know, my thing with, I know automakers, they want to be able to sell cars and sell data, you know, but my thing is, statistics have already shown that people are buying less cars. So, you know, I would think a car is worth more than data. So if you really want to sell more cars, you need to really think about the fact that consumers don't want this. You know, I don't know anyone, frankly, who would agree or wants their data sold in a way that could possibly harm them, right? So I think that there's a lot more scrutiny here. The day before I did my presentation, the Federal Trade Commission actually put out a blog post about connected cars and privacy, and the fact that they considered someone's geolocation to be sensitive data. And that, to me, that was news to some car makers. They thought, oh, you know, obviously, if you have a car as a connected car, it's collecting your exact location, right? But then it's like, they're saying the FTC is like, well, we consider that sensitive data, so you have to protect that data in different ways. I think the car makers have been slow to understand that, but I think that the tide is turning there. But as much as people should vote with their money, right? They should voice their concerns, because, you know, at some point they're going to realize, wait a minute, I'm not really selling cars here. So I need to be more transparent. I need to give people more choice in how their data is being collected and used.
Yeah, I think the best point you made, so like regarding that, is that it's going to be harder to justify selling our data if it's not for like in the good faith of the consumer, right? If it's not just about selling the car anymore, how are you going to justify it? And that almost feels like, I feels like that's going to be the legal argument for privacy. Like, how does this help the person? So I like, honestly, this was an amazing, amazing session.
Thank
Thank
you. It's my pleasure.
you.
Debbie, thanks for this wonderful session. So before we go, I would like to ask if somebody else has any more questions, and I would like to thank Debbie later. So Suresh has asked, is car privacy in Europe better than in USA?
Yes. It is. So part of car privacy, the part of the reason why car privacy is better in Europe than the US is because Europe has more comprehensive privacy laws, right? So their laws are more human based. So an example that I gave about this woman who couldn't get her the auto company to disconnect the GPS for her husband because he was the owner of the car, that would not be an issue in Europe because even whether you're the owner or not, the fact that the car has your personal data, you have a right, right? So I think that the comprehensive laws that they have in Europe cover more of these issues. Obviously, Europe is also looking into, they're doing regulations around cars as well, because additional regulation around cars, because they know cars are so, have so much data that they collect or so many things they do. So I think we're going to see a lot more activity around here, hopefully, especially being able to have people universally opt out, or even in some cases, making certain features opt in and make it more transparent. I think that's the hope for the US, but Europe is farther ahead on privacy just in general. And a lot of the gaps that we have here in the US, they don't have in Europe because they have more of a human based as opposed to a consumer based privacy right.
Debbie, it was wonderful to have you here and learn from you. I hope the ones who have to take notice of this, take notice and do more of the regulation and the laws such that the consumers are protected and we all have a better future. And with that note, I would like to end the session. And thanks a lot, Debbie, for making time and coming here and sharing your views with us.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Debbie.
thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Weekly Wed happens every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And I will meet you next Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Follow Business School of AI for all the updates and even the newsletter that will give you this video recording and other details which you can follow up and learn more about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.